the world donned in shock. The images began to circulate at dawn. A series of violent explosions directly hit the heavy water reactor in Iraq, one of Iran's most sensitive nuclear facilities. For the first time in recent history, Israel decided to break all diplomatic and military barriers to perform a preventive attack against such a target in Iranian territory. The goal was clear: damage the core of the installation, affecting the critical seal of the plutonium cooling and containment system. A surgical action, but with potential for unpredictable consequences. The Iraq reactor, currently called Kandab, has been in the center of international attention for years. Since 2015, when the nuclear agreement with Iran was signed, the destination of this installation was closely accompanied by the great powers. The agreement provided for the reconfiguration of the reactor to prevent plutonium production at levels capable of enabling nuclear weaponry. However, everything changed in 2018 when the United States, under the Trump administration, decided to leave the deal. From there, Tehran began to restore Iraq to his original model, rekindling the concerns of Israel and the West. For Israeli strategists, the attack was just a matter of time. They were following a military doctrine that had been applied before, with devastating results to their enemies. In 1981, Israel bombed the Osirak reactor in Iraq, fearing the advance of the nuclear program of Saddam Hussein. In 2007, it was Syria's turn, with the attack on the installation of Al-Kabar, which was under construction with North Korean help. Now, in 2025, Iraq became the third name on this list, a symbol that for Israel allowing hostile enemies to develop nuclear weapons will never be an option. The context of this decision, however, was much more complex. Behind the scenes, political and military analysts claim that Israeli intelligence had been monitoring suspicious Iraq activities for months. Satellites, recognition drones, and infiltrated agents have detected a significant increase in reactor reactivation operations. Secret reports indicated that Iran could be just a few months old to extract enough plutonium for the production of 1 or 2 nuclear warheads per year. Israel's strategic calculation was simple but brutal. Either they acted now or agreed to live under the threat of a nuclear Iran. The operation was planned in absolute confidentiality. F-35 fighters with stealth technology crossed the airspace of neighboring countries to Iran on a carefully calculated route to avoid radars. Military sources indicate that deep penetration missiles have been used, specially designed to break reinforced concrete layers and reach underground areas of the complex. The main target, the plutonium cooling and containment system. Damage this point meant making it unfeasible for months or even years the production capacity of nuclear material in the installation. The Iranian answer was practically immediate. Within hours, missiles were fired towards Israel. Tel Aviv, Hamadan, and Beersheba entered the maximum alert. The airstrike sirens sounded all night. Several projectiles managed to break the Israeli defense system, the well-known Iron Dome. One of the places hit was the Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, causing civilians and generating images of chaos and despair. Social networks quickly filled with videos showing destroyed hospital corridors, doctors trying to save injured amid the rubble, and desperate citizens looking for missing family members. This retaliation caused an immediate wave of debates on the international scene. Human rights organizations began to raise the hypothesis of Iran's war crimes due to attacks against civil targets. On the Iranian side, the narrative was another. The attack on Iraq was described as an act of premeditated war, a flagrant violation of national sovereignty and a crime against peace. The government of Tehran has summoned an emergency meeting at the UN Security Council and demanded immediate sanctions against Israel. Meanwhile, new information began to emerge on the extent of the Israeli operation. Unofficial sources indicated that Iraq had not been the only target. Installings in Natanz, Iran's best-known uranium enrichment center, would also have been attacked. There were still unconfirmed rumors that the Bushehr nuclear power plant on the Iranian south coast would have suffered collateral damage. The military climbing was evident. Israel made it clear that his intention was not just sending a symbolic message. It was a strategic campaign to weaken the Iranian nuclear abilities as much as possible. Israel's own Minister of Defense, in a live speech, said Iran has surpassed every possible red lines, and all options were on the table to protect the Israeli people from existential threats. As the bombs fell, diplomats around the world ran to try to contain an even larger catastrophe. In Washington, emergency meetings were summoned at the Pentagon. The U.S. president, visibly tense, made a statement saying that the situation was under thorough analysis and that the U.S. was in direct contact with its allies to evaluate the next steps. Analysts began to speculate. Are we on the brink of an open war between Israel, Iran, and, by extension, other regional powers? While the wreckage still burned on Iraq's facilities, a new round of Israeli attacks began to unfold. The uranium enrichment center in Natanz was the second great target. Sources of intelligence indicated that in recent months, Iran had been accelerating the number of active centrifuges, exceeding the limits established by the 2015 nuclear agreement. According to analysts, Israel knew that the destruction of Iraq alone would not be enough to paralyze the Iranian nuclear program. It was also necessary to achieve uranium enrichment capacity, creating a domino effect that would take Iran back to the zero. Reports from residents near Natanz describe a sequence of powerful explosions, followed by bleachers in several neighboring cities. Witnesses claim that the sound of the explosions was heard more than 50 kilometers away. Some satellite images, released by international agencies in the following hours, show large craters in the area where the main centrifugal rooms were. Still, the Iranian government maintained the official silence in the first 24 hours, trying to minimize the psychological impact on the population. At the same time, rumors arose that the Bushehr plant, the only nuclear center in commercial operation in Iran, would also have been hit by long-range cruise missiles. Although Israel has not officially confirmed, Western sources of defense indicated that damage was recorded in Bushehr's electrical facilities, compromising the power supply of southern Iran. This generated worldwide concern about the risk of radioactive leakage, which could affect not only the Porzes, but also international business routes. Tehran's reaction came on two fronts. First, a direct military climb. Medium-range ballistic missiles were launched from Iranian underground bases towards several Israeli cities. Although the Iron Dome defense system was able to intercept most projectiles, some managed to break the defenses, causing destruction in residential neighborhoods. Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa went into emergency. Videos broadcast live showed whole families seeking shelter in underground parking lots, while sirens continued to sound. The second front of response was diplomatic and strategic. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei made a televised pronouncement that quickly reverberated around the world. Visibly annoyed, he stated that the United States will be held responsible for any Israeli action and threatened irreparable damage if Washington decided to intervene militarily. These words put even more pressure on the White House, which until then had been trying to balance support to Israel with the need to avoid open war in the region. While the weather warmed in Tehran and Jerusalem in Washington, the tension reached the apex. The U.S. president, during an emergency meeting in the Oval Hall, was informed that the Pentagon had already completed a contingency plan for possible attacks on Iran. According to anonymous sources within the Defense Department, the plan included coordinated air bombing against Iranian missile launch bases and command centers. American naval forces, including USS Dwight D. Eisenhower aircraft carrier, began to strategically position themselves in the Persian Gulf. The possibility of an American intervention has caused the stock exchanges around the world to react immediately. The price of the oil barrel fired, surpassing the $150 mark. European countries, fearing an energy collapse, called emergency meetings to discuss oil and gas safety. The UN, in turn, called an extraordinary session of the Security Council. Russia and China, traditionally allies of Iran, vehemently criticized Israel's actions, classifying the attack as a serious violation of international law. While the world leaders argued, the people on the streets faced the raw reality of war. In Iran, citizens formed lines in gas stations, fearing a total supply block. In Israeli cities, the fear of new missile attacks spread like a virus. Families reinforced the doors of their homes with what they could, creating true makeshift bunkers. The schools were closed, the paralyzed public transport and the telephone lines were congested. On the military side, Israel continued with his posture of total readiness. The Israeli defense minister, in a new press conference, was even more emphatic. He said before the cameras that Iran's supreme leader Khamenei can no longer exist, and that Israel was prepared to eliminate Iranian political and military leadership if necessary. This statement, which looked more like a direct threat of political murder, lit the maximum alert on all the chances in the world. Analysts in Washington, London, and Paris began to make worrying projections. A direct attack on Iranian leadership could be the final fuse for a total war in the Middle East. Iran's allied groups, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Shiite militias in Iraq, began to mobilize troops and weapons. In Yemen, the Houthis announced that they were ready to attack commercial ships in the Red Sea in retaliation to what they called Zionist aggression. In the field of social networks, the war of narratives also intensified. While pro-Israel profiles celebrated the destruction of Iranian nuclear facilities, users from all over the Islamic world cried out of revenge. Hashtags such as #FreeIran and #IsraelWarKrimas led trending topics on Twitter, while videos of civilians killed on the streets of Tel Aviv and in Iranian cities viralized every minute. The scenario was mounted. The next few hours would be decisive. The whole world held breathing, awaiting the next movement. The climbing so far seemed uncontrollable. Israel directly attacked the heavy water reactor in Iraq, currently called Kandab, aiming at the core of the installation to damage the critical seal of the plutonium cooling and containment system. The goal was to prevent Iran from producing enough plutonium to make nuclear weapons. It is estimated that the reactor had the potential to generate up to 10 kilograms of plutonium per year, which would be enough to build up to 2 nuclear warheads every 12 months, a threat that Israel was not willing to tolerate. This attack marked a new stage in the Israeli doctrine of preventive attacks, a strategy that was consolidated with bombing to the Osirak reactor in 1981 and the Syrian installation of Al-Kibar. Dramatic and dangerous, the Iranian answer did not take long. In retaliation, Iran launched a series of ballistic missiles against Israeli targets, including Tel Aviv, Hamat Gan, and Beersheba. Unfortunately, the action hit civilian areas, such as Soroka Hospital, causing low civilians and increasing international tension. This episode generated heated debates about the possibility of war crimes, with international organizations demanding rigorous investigations. In addition to Iraq, Israel widened the scope of the attacks, aiming for other Iranian nuclear facilities. Natanz, a well-known uranium enrichment center, was hit, and there were reports, not yet officially confirmed, that the Bushehr plant would also have been damaged. This expansion of the offensive increased the risk of an environmental disaster by radiation and enhanced the crisis in the region. In the diplomatic and military field, the climb reached its tense point. Iranian Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in an inflamed statement, threatened the United States with irreparable damage if the U.S. country directly intervened in the conflict. In an equally aggressive way, the Minister of Defense of Israel stated that Khamenei can no longer exist, suggesting that Iranian leadership has become the priority target of future military actions. The United States, in turn, confirmed that they evaluate a joint military intervention. Then President Donald Trump indicated that Pentagon and Israel discuss coordinated plans for possible broader attacks on Iran. This left the world on the brink of a large-scale war, with potential devastating consequences for the entire region and beyond. The attack on the active reactor in Iraq, even if considered inoperative in practice, was seen by experts such as the violation of a sacred limit. Until then, there was a kind of tacit consensus among the powers not to attack active nuclear facilities, precisely to avoid the possibility of a nuclear disaster. Breaking this barrier was a bold move from Israel, which may have opened a dangerous precedent. The risk of a broader regional conflict is real and growing. The sequence of attacks, retaliation, and threats places the region in a path that seems to inevitably lead to a point of non-return. Militant groups combined with Iran mobilize, neighboring countries strengthen their defenses, and the world powers are increasingly aggressive. This crisis is a dark reminder that on the Middle East board, a wrong play can trigger a war with global impacts. The tension between Israel and Iran is, above all, a warning about the fragility of world peace in the face of nuclear race and conflicts of geopolitical interests. Now the world observes and waits to see if diplomacy will be able to intervene in time, or if the region will be about to enter a new chapter of violence and instability.